Maybe good pairings? Should start with pairings.
Yeah, we're already live, but I usually go up to about 10 seconds before, then I know we start recording. So, Andrew, could you please tell us what you're looking to get out of this event? Because I think that will help the audience.
Hi everyone, my name is Andrei, and I sometimes work with people, work in small groups. I kind of facilitate the interaction. And so I'm really interested in Mology's, Victor's DCNH system of subtypes, and especially the dynamics, how people interact once they're assigned to small groups. And so I'd like to learn how to maybe optimize the way to assign people to groups so they can extract as much benefit as possible from the group interaction. So, there are benefits and adverse effects to group interactions. I'd like to maximize the benefits. So I'm here to learn, basically.
So one bit, you use the terminology small groups. How are you using? I mean, I got an idea what that means, but for the audience, what do you mean by small groups?
For me, small groups anywhere more than 2 people, and maybe no more than 8. So typically 4 to 6 that's what's in my mind.
Now, there's a new small group. I'm going off topic, but this is something that's interesting that we can get in later on. There's a small group that Keirsey came up with, and Christen and I were talking about this a few days ago. And I'll just put this on screen. So this is what Keirsey's new small. I've asked. Nobody knows what they're called. There's a collective like, what are these things? And so, what's weird is that it's kind of like a TE approach of. It's like the opposite of where everything's based on raining and it works from the inside out. It's like these groups work even though they shouldn't. Let's try and work out at a deeper level why they work. So, for example, Keirsey put together SFPs and NTPs. Now, what we could say is DCNH is a big help in this. If we then start thinking about, well, the way Keirsey views all those types, he pretty much sees them all as creative subtype when he looks at, certainly with the SFPs. His definition of ESFP is the performer, is definitely creative subtype of SEE. I've looked in Victor's book. I read through it. It sounds like Jeff Miller, who we've done interviews with. I've read the Keirsey ISFP. The closest type to it in SOCIONICS is ESI harmonizing subtype. So both of those are I say project initiating rather than initiating because it gets confused with other similar terms used in Keirsey. So, and then NTPs, again, Keirsey's got them creative. He's got ENTP as the inventor, the modeler. He's got INTP as the designer. So right there, in terms of the way Keirsey sees those types, in terms of subtypes, they're all creative. ESFP creative, ISFP creative, INTP creative, ENTP creative. And especially if we then look at, say, the way he frames ISFP as creative on a compositional level, and it's usually in the fields of art or music, and it's almost like, and then you've got INTP predisposed to the role of designing something. Just look at Victor designing Model G, designing things on an intellectual level. And so there you can sort of say, well, one's strategic on an NT level, more complexity, more abstraction. And the other thing for, say, ISFP is more on a concrete level. And Linda Berens would say, because ISFP and INTP are both behind the scenes, they both integrate different inputs. And so ISFP would balance different inputs to get it into a composition. Now, what I can do is I can give you an example of this. So I've been reading lots of books by Patterson. He's a songwriting guru. He co-founded Berkeley College. I think he's an ISFP resembler, and not just because of his black leather jacket. And that is
Your audio cut.
He'll be right back.
Yeah, he probably has to rejoin. Yeah, I would love to hear how, well, I can share some of the ways I've organized small groups. And, oh, hey.
Thanks for filling. Yes, so just this thing about Patterson, because I'm looking here about the similarities between, let's call it Keirsey ISFP and INTP and creative INTP designing stuff. And what I noticed with Patterson is, and he wrote a book called Lyric Form and Structure, and in his videos on YouTube, he talks about prosody in terms of everything working together. So he says, if you've got an unstable idea in the lyric, you should have unstable music. So everything working together on like different planes. And so he's integrating these different aspects, line length. If you've got an unstable idea, unstable line lengths, where it's all, and so, because it's like the idea of stability, instability, and when everything's like neat and symmetrical, it gives a feeling of stability. But when suddenly stuff, also rhyme types as well. When the rhyme types are less than perfect, again, it has a feel of instability. So integrating these different things. Who else integrates things? INTP integrates lots of different factors. And Victor's system is very much integrated and all balanced out and nicely internally consistent. Would you agree with that, Andre, that Victor's got a lot of internal consistency? He's got it all balanced.
That's interesting for a creative type to have that much consistency, and I'm finding it fascinating.
So do you? So have you got Victor pegged as a creative subtype?
I don't know. Probably.
He's against dogma. That's much. That much is for sure.
You see, that's another thing about creatives, especially like if you take that's a whole other thing. Like, how can you be? What I don't understand is how people can be flexible on the outside and be rigid on the inside.
Well,
Remember that graphic?
I've seen quite a few articles by D.A. Drenth, where he wrote about JP with introverts, and he wrote about, and he resembles INTP himself. And this is the weird thing with INTP. Internally, we can be rigid, but it's the static thing, isn't it? That particular model.
Yes.
But then we can just throw that model away and have a new model. Whereas SJs are more likely to stick with the model and be less flexible. So so I actually added to Victor's book, static dynamic, is just compare it staccato versus legato. So it's like instead of it's like this model, or change my mind about this model, change my mind. But whilst we're on that model, we're static until we make that change. Whereas I think with the dynamic types, it's continually adapting, and they don't really have a static view.
Okay, I gotta think about it, because for me to back Victor as creative INTP with like this static would have to be pronounced somehow, right? Like if I understand the model correctly.
Well, maybe harmonizing, because I wouldn't put that. That does make sense as well.
But externally, keeps changing.
Yeah.
Generating ideas and so on and so forth, but keeping this kind of core set of ideas in a certain rigid form. That's what static looks to.
What I've heard said by Victor, people have complained that he keeps changing his mind, and when he does, but I actually think there's a lot of biography coming out here where he's actively working against what he felt classical socionics has become in terms of too rigid. And it's like, I don't want to be like that. I don't want to, even in my own writings, I don't want them to be seen as dogma. And it's similar to Carl Jung saying that he didn't want to be looked at as a god, and Jung said this, and he said in an interview that he wanted, or it may have been Marie-Louise von Franz, that he actually wanted people, I think it was her, where she talked about effectively think for yourselves. I think it's a general trend that INTP resemblers want people to think for themselves. Is that true of you, Andrew? Andrew?
I won't be able to think of my own, or like
No.
generate my own.
Do you encourage people to think for themselves rather than just take your word?
Okay, well, maybe it's part of my training, but I do ask a lot of leading questions without giving out answers. So I almost become like a politician in a way. Okay, you ask me a question, I cannot give you direct answers, but what about this? What about that? You kind of attack it from all different directions and maybe getting the person to the right answer.
It might be the context of the people you're teaching and the level that you're teaching them at. So if you were say you were a PhD supervisor from somebody, and you were supervising somebody taking a PhD, you would probably emphasize them to think more for themselves rather than you teaching somebody at a lower level where you want them to get the basics across. And maybe they're not ready yet to think for themselves at that point because they need to, or you want, or as you say, you're getting them to think for themselves, but to get to the right point with a leading question.
It's all complicated, but yeah, I don't.
It's that old rule about you need to know the rules before you can break them. So it's like once people know all the rules, then you can start thinking for yourself and knowing how, okay, I'm going to break this theory now and think for myself, and then I'll go back to the principles in which it works. Because otherwise, I'm going off track, but I think there's a big difference between someone who knows the theory and then differs from the theory and thinks for themselves versus someone who's just getting into it, doesn't really have the fundamentals, and then starts thinking for themselves, but it's based on not having a proper understanding of the basic theory.
Yeah, that's me.
Right.
And until I read more and more and more, and I kind of create this kind of a big holographic view on this whole thing. But yeah, okay. I think we diverged a little bit. Where were we?
Yeah, because we were talking about creative subtype, and then we got on to Victor.
Funny though, I was very interested to hear you guys hear you describing that, Ben, about the understanding the framework first before you break it and encourage the free thinking, because I like to encourage that right away with my students. I find they get so much structure in school and everywhere else, and that they have fewer outlets to think for themselves. So kind of like it doesn't matter if they're 5 years old or 25 years old. Usually, you need to think independently more and have tools for that. But you do have a point about them needing different tools, and I think this is where the personality types come in. Is with all tools available, what is someone likely to choose as a tool when you present them with the toolbox of things?
Also, it's not, say with people learning socionics, they want to get everything down. They want to get all of the understanding down, and I remember being at that stage as well. It's like, because you do think in a rigid way when you first learn a subject that is so structural, and then once you've learnt the structure and you're thinking about it, it's like then you know how it's just a model, that the map, the map is not the territory it represents, and how it differs from that. It's not how people get into typology. It's like they get into typology, they see the types as like, they see it rigidly, and then they see how it plays out, and they'll probably notice subtypes and things like that, and non-type factors, and they notice the nuances more. You'll be better at it. You've been in it for a while, Christen. What's been your experience with, say, how you started with typology and how and your thinking through maybe of how a type changed, or what a type means to you when you first learnt it, then you're in the middle, and then where you are now?
Let's see. So I first got into the MBTI coding, just the 4 letters, and just seeing the 4 letters flipping. And then from there got into Jung's functions. After that, a little bit of socionics, because there's applicability in socionics with the relationships. And that I've just always had the interest in pairing people up or building teams. I've always worked in small teams. And then with tutoring and one-on-one, was very interested in dynamics again, and socionics came into play. For holes that I saw out of those two systems, like what was missing, I ventured into Enneagram a little bit. I saw that as kind of like different flavors of types. If and someone has these core ways of processing stuff, and viewing the core ways of processing as Jung's functions, and then viewing some of the learned behaviors on top as the Enneagram, and that being like a learned kind of almost like shield kind of, or toolbox that you acquire in life. Yeah, I've even gotten into like a little bit of moon and star stuff, as far as just a little bit of core energy that maybe a person has innately somewhere. So, yeah, just sprinkled out a little bit from there. But those are kind of the core ones, though, that I've used are the Jung's functions, socionics, and Enneagram.
It's interesting there with Enneagram, because you have got an example of how it is very internal, but also external as well. Is like when Tom Condon said that people carry around the types of their parents.
Yeah.
And so, and the way you explain it is like when you see like the earlier books, it's like parental, and that is a big factor. But there's also those. I mean, it might actually be better to actually teach Enneagram as fixations rather than as types.
Oh.
Because I personally am wary of what a type is, because people use it as an identity, because a lot of it is people, they want to know that they're okay, that they're not weird.
Yes.
They want to know that they're okay. And so...
And the answer is we're all weird.
Yeah. But you know what I mean? Like, especially if it's like, if someone's an intuitive introvert, they're going to feel weird. They're going to feel a bit alienated. Like, well, what is it with me? Is there something wrong with me? And it's like, oh, there's this. And then it becomes a bit like, the more I am like this type, and the type becomes a role model, but you concentrate, it's, and it helps with subtypes. So you can say, imagine someone's a subtype that's different from the profile. They identify with the profile, but then maybe they ignore the things about their subtype, and they try and change themselves to be more like this type. And so I remember an INTP resemblance telling me once that they felt a little bit bad that, like, especially like the Keirsey on the Keirsey website, like the INTP is like written as a genius level, and it's like you got to compare yourself to that. And some other types, say someone's got ESFP preferences, and they read about the ESFP profile, and it's like, oh, they're charismatic, there's always a party around them, and all of these things. And Jeff did a video about this where he called it ESFP preference versus reality. And he said everything related to what the ESFP wants, he related to, but not the specific behaviors about where.
Yes.
And so I'm a lot on the motivation now, because I realize, and it's Dario's reinforced this, functions are buckets for cognitive processes. And we know that cognitive processes develop. People learn skills. And so if you put somebody who's naturally INFJ, and you put them through a course where they learn a load of mathematics, and then you've got someone who's naturally INTP, and you've got them doing something else in a different culture. And it's like, if you then have a rigid model that then says 4D TI versus 2D TI, it's like it doesn't become like that anymore, because
your audio cut.
Just a comment about subtypes of, for example, ESFP. I know someone who is an SFP, but they are normalizing type. So I guess their TI and FI are being expressed a bit more. And so you wouldn't even say they were ESFP, but they managed to do a lot of things in terms of organization, like contacting people, working the network very well, organizing social events really good. But they were so quiet, but they're absolutely excellent in connecting with people and solving problems, working around obstacles. And yeah, I agree. Like there is this type and there is a subtype. Yeah.
And so I will talk about type resemblance. And Linda Barron's used like a lot of the stuff I do. Linda Barron's has already done and already thought. So like she called it like, and Dario called it like type pattern. And then Carol Linden once joked about she called herself an ENFP and said, "Oh, Linda won't like that. I have to say I have ENFP preferences." See, that's a massive difference between I am an ENFP versus I have ENFP preferences. It makes a huge difference. Because then it doesn't get in the way of personal development.
Right. Or talking. That's why I like putting things with the functions quite a bit. And what I've liked about your diagrams, Ben, is that they're some of the labels on that you've sent me, they're by function types. And I've heard Dario say preferred functions. This person tends to use this function a lot. And that speaks to the flexibility of type and of the cognitive functions, where you can have your preferences or natural ways that you fall into, but then there's things you've learned to do in life.
Yeah, and Dario's research is shown, I mean, people know this already, that what people learn changes the brain just as much, and culture, education, career has an impact on the brain just as much as type. And really it's about, and Dario writes about, and it's in Keirsey as well, preference leads to practice, practice leads to skill. But then there's also times where people have to practice stuff that's not preferred. And I like the quote from Megan Novota, feelers have to go to school. But,
yeah.
So.
But the rest of us in TJ, I can say like, oh no, where's my emotions school?
Yeah, where's the finishing school? Where's that subject? There should be a subject in that.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I remember when I was at school, when they did like the personal development stuff, most of it we weren't doing anything. Just sitting in the class. That would help a lot if they did that. So we're sort of going around here, folks, because like this is an advanced level event, I reckon. That's why we're going into these little bits. So,
on the pairings, one thing you said, already mentioned, you held up the book with Keirsey's labels,
right.
And the SFP and NTP you mentioned, they get paired up in single pairings or group. And I think that's pretty interesting because that falls in the benefit rings. Those are across the circle from each other. Just the middle two letters flipped, and it does something interesting to the functions when you map them out.
But what's interesting though is you get a complete contradiction though when you've got ESFJ and ENTJ, because ESFJ is a compliant inquirer and ENTJ is an adaptive enterpriser. So it does give us these little angles to look at differences, but in terms of roles, so Keirsey had ESFJ predisposed to the role of, I might as well show it on screen. He had ESFJ predisposed to the role of, it's just like with interaction style and DCNH subtype, where you got to look closely. So for example, Elena V and who interpreted for us in VG number 22 with Dario, and Mitchell are both identifiers like ILI harmonizing subtype. So Keirsey Bowen's not the INTJ. Now in Keirsey Bowen's they are contending, they are directive, but that's going to be less so when they're the harmonizing subtype. So you've got to look carefully for how directive they are, because they are harmonizing and they do come across as more personable. And I think a lot, and Elena V for a long time felt that she resembled IEI more than ILI, because you do get that extra FI. You might seem like more of a feeler because you're the harmonizing subtype. And so, and also if you've got ILI, if you've got INTJ that's harmonizing, you've probably got extra FI. And if you've got extra FI, you might think that you might go with that beneficiary shift to INFP. But then but then because you've also got the extroverted sensing, you might then, and then whilst you're shifted to INFP, when you read profiles, you might relate to INFJ. But in terms of typing people who are ILI harmonizing versus IEI, you got to look at the facial expression over a long period, and like, when are they expressive? And it tends to be blink and you miss it with ILI. But we can't have a stereotypical image that all like INFJ resemblers are as facially expressive as Julia O and Elena Ames as like ESFJ resemblance, because like Enneagram can come into it. So we mustn't like just use one data point of that person's got an expressive face, therefore they have strong ethics and emotions. But going all over the place today. So this is the wrong graphic. This is the ENTP. But getting back to looking between. Right. Okay. That's ESF. Right. Okay. So
Ben, before we move on from that point, one thing that helps me tell a difference between IEI and ILI is I don't know. It's like one word descriptors I sent you the other day. Like, I feel that IEIs are more dreamers. Kind of have a kind of dreaming personality to them. They kind of, and ILI is a bit more thoughtful. They kind of take their time to formulate their thoughts.
I personally would tell the difference between the two by looking at temperaments. I look at NF versus NT, and they wanting different things and following up and really getting towards.
Oh, we lost you again. Christen, how do you identify? Like, your resembler?
It's tough. I guess because it's been like 10 or more years than that, actually now 15, I guess, that sometimes it's off the cuff. Someone will resemble someone else that I know, and I just kind of have an instinct about their type. I have a quick slides too. I've asked plenty of people to do.
So one of the things, so say if you're deciding between someone who's INFJ and INTJ, so NIFX, NITX, and say it's not just a case of, oh, this person's interested in science and stuff, therefore they're an NT. No, you got to follow up in terms of why they're interested in it, because then
why are they in?
Because you can get NF reasons for being interested in it. Just like with Julia, you can have ESFJ reasons, SF reasons for her being into neuroscience, working on neurodegenerative diseases to help people. So you're coming from an SF place, but then also by biography as well, given who her father was, and like a strong NT professor. I won't name him, but that's going to have an impact into, because SJ is very much affected by their parents, and if their parents are abstract, saying maybe in your case, like, oh, you got to get into this science and all this kind of stuff. And science, and a lot of science can be taken from the point of view of ST anyway. Real measurable stuff.
What about INTP becoming musician? How do you?
Oh, that could definitely happen. Remember I said before about composer and designer, structural level, like because I've read Pat Patterson's Lyric Form and Structure, loads of structural logic, and he's got a PhD, and like the way he analyzes stuff, and it's like a smaller scale version of design. But then also, if you think about a novelist, there could be a lot of plot to work out, say in a crime novel. Very intricate structural logic going on there. With well, what would this character do in this situation?
Yeah. Right.
And there's probably Agatha Christie getting it started, like so many female crime novelists, which is not what you would expect with the preference of feeling versus thinker. Right, because there's generally more female feelers than thinkers. But it was probably because Agatha Christie showed the way. That is interesting. Because you'd think that, women would be more interested in the psychology of it. But then you could also follow up, so you could ask a feeler, why are you interested in crime novels? They're interested in the psychology of the criminal as to why they're doing it. Things like that. So I like following up with the motivation, because also Enneagram we know how much a type can vary. And you're right. Most people in the West, they don't know about DCNH, but they know that when they know Enneagram, they also get into Enneagram. So when they know MBTI, they also get into Enneagram, and they sort of use that as their subtype system.
I think it's I can't remember who it was that I found. Oh, Pat Wyman. She does this as like a therapy method. She's a behavior scientist or a therapist, or I'm butchering this at this point, but she works with clients and helps them and uses those two systems overlapped with Myers-Briggs as the core type and the Enneagram layered over as learned behaviors, primarily from childhood, as you're talking about the parents' role and influence. So I think you've caught on that, in the West, that's a practice, is to layer those rather than having subtypes in socionics.
And they go even further because they have tri-type as well, and instinctual stacking. And I think I put them all together. It's like over 1,000 combinations if you use tri-type and instinctual stackings and wings. You get about 1,000 combinations.
Then the model has to be practical and usable, not academic.
But when people really, the NFs adore Enneagram because it gets into what they're interested in, motivation.
Yeah.
And they're the best at it as well.
I know. They know it so thoroughly.
Because that's their focus of attention. And one of the things I learned from NLP, Chris Howard, I love this phrase, your focus determines your reality. And the type and the focus of different types vary so much. Like INTJ is not focusing on FE stuff. So the reality of an ESFJ is going to be completely different from INTJ.
Now they can make an interesting pair though.
Go on.
Work group wise. Yeah. I've known some INTJs that as far as whatever work they're doing or project they're on, that's usually like forward thinking, multifaceted, that having an assistant maybe or a right-hand person helping out that does more forward-facing things, an ESFJ that's really good with people, can help them build connections, maintain connections that facilitate their work or their project or their focus. And I think because they use completely different functions, they don't share any functions, that they cannot step on each other's toes if they have clear roles defined.
So, me, I
think that's one of the unexpected pairings that Andre was asking about with in making small groups. I think those can be surprisingly good pairs if they have if they have a focus. So if they do have a project or some kind of deadline they're mutually trying to meet, that the first three letters flipped, the way functions work out are pretty interesting. And it can work very well in a project that they're bringing completely different things to the table, different skills and different ways of thinking just into like an ESFJ or an INTJ, or like with mine, ESTJ, that would be an INFJ.
So we can notice so as people know, I like to use Keirsey and SOCIONICS. together, and if people don't like it, deal with it. I'm going to stick with it. I'm not going to change now. So we can notice
Too
the
far
interest,
down the road.
but I'm not going to be sweeping under the carpet differences. I will highlight differences as well. And so some of the rings that we have, so right introverts, where we've got, say, and we can do it by subtype, because so when we so think SEI normalizing for SIFE, and that goes up, and so their main interaction style is accommodating, and also INFP is accommodating, in that Berens would call it behind the scenes and integrating different inputs. So INFP, they want all their values in alignment. They don't want any incongruence. They want to be congruent. They want their actions to match their feelings. Otherwise, they're going to have cognitive dissonance. You can also see it for INTP. You can see it for ISFP. It's harder to see it for ISFJ because they're so like, to them, I think it's like integrating other people's needs into a whole. It's harder. Usually with these small groups, like the 75% brilliant and then 25% not so much. But we can definitely see how ISFP integrates things. And what else does that go towards in ISFP? Any break. Because the any break.
NE?
Yeah, any. Because any. It's like Patterson would complain about songs that went from place to place to place to place. And he's like, he wants people to stay on track, not to digress onto other things. And so any break is like no digressions, keep on track, keep focused, have a unity, have everything procedy and integrated. And so that's going to be weird though for INTP, where part of them wants to integrate stuff, but then the other part of them is seeing connections between things. So then it's integrating the different things into one system. And Victor, I think, does that with his stool. Like he talks about bringing in these from different sources and grouping them together in his school of socionics. So he's got NLP in there, I-accessing cues, and other ideas from different subjects. So we could look at the ring of what we're going. Let's. What should we look at? Okay, it's just let's try and go in order. Right.
We could look at the ring.
We could look at the ring. Yes, you'll show your rings.
Yeah.
Yes, there we go. So, what do you want to say about the one at the top? I think what do you want to say about the one at the top with
the one at the top?
So when the arrow, so what is the arrow is pointing towards? It looks like the beneficiary.
Who's giving? Yes, who's receiving the benefit? Yeah, I like to view this too. I saw in another video someone commented on the way my arrows go. I like to point in the direction that the energy is flowing forward, not who's like the energy the direction that energy is being given out.
Right.
Yeah, so this is an ENTJ giving benefit to an ESTP who gives benefit to an ESFJ who gives benefit to an ENFP.
Yeah, and it makes sense. Like the benefactor gives and the beneficiary receives. So in Model G, it's complicated because of the different planes with the pips planes. So you can see how on certain levels that it can go one way and then it goes the other way. So for instance, on an intellectual level, it's still mainly going to go from INTP to INFJ. But on a psychological level and a social level, INFJ is definitely the benefactor. And on a physiological level, INTP is rubbish. Because they've got weak extroverted sensing, weak SI, and weak TE. I mean, they could be strong on that level intellectually about TE stuff.
Well, and this is what I think is interesting that you're saying is the weak on TE, because you will, with my circles here, the way they're mapped out, and you would benefit from ISTJ, who TE is in their parent role. If you look at Jung's function, under the concept that your first function is your hero, your second one is your parent, the way that you teach, your third third function being your child, the way you want to be helped, or the way that you're playful, and then fourth as inferior. So here, yeah, ISTJ, their second function is their parent, which you're mentioning for INTP is weak.
Unfortunately, this is the one type which doesn't have a subtype that matches up in Keirsey Nardi. So, for example, LSI has one subtype that matches ISTP, creative subtype. ESI, harmonizing, you can say matches ISFP. Normalizing, SEI matches ISFJ. But even the creative subtype of SLI isn't really, no, not creative subtype, even normalizing subtype of SLI isn't like ISTJ. It's annoying. And so then we have to sort of decide by how it plays out, how Socionics got it right or wrong when it comes to this type. And maybe like with a proper analysis in the future, we could look at, okay, how do different schools of Socionics see SLI? How do they see the various subtypes of SLI? And then we could look at it through experiments and EEG as to which system has got it the wrong way around in terms of the...
I guess, well, maybe I can talk about like a personal ISTJ I've known and what they do and how I've seen that benefit INTP. Is that an ISTJ gathering information from the world around them, like very detailed information about structures and the way that things are done, and putting those into like set systems of like, oh, okay, you know, like I'm a woodworker. They encounter a really quality made couch, and are like, oh, we'll get into it and see how the frame's made and be able to reproduce it. And then that's like the way they will always make couches. And then an INTP gets that. And then that's a set model of how a quality couch is made. That the INTP, at least that I've seen, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, would take that model of a couch and want to improve on it or play with it or ask, how can this system be improved? Or what are other systems for couch making? And that's how they'll take that set information from an ISTJ and expand on it using, I think they'll take it in as a TI set structure and then want to NE create new.
So I'm going to give people an argument for why I believe Linda Bones and MBTI has got the functions right for ISTJ. This might be heresy for the Socionics people, but I can give you some evidence. Look at your MBTI ISTJs. What are they like? Well, I don't know. I've got a little bit of a flat voice and not much emotional expression. So this is a little bit consistent with FE break. So maybe my functions are SI and TE. You know, because if they're really LSI, if you've got someone who's ISTJ and MBTI, and they've got that flat tone, of voice, and they've got the lack of expression, then you've got to say, that's FE break. Therefore, functions-wise, it makes more sense to see them as SI and TE. Because LSI, which functionally is TI and SE or TI and SI, wouldn't be like that. Especially when they're older, they would develop more extroverted feeling. And also what you see with MBTI ISTJs, what do we notice about MBTI ISTJs? They've got that little bit of NE about them. That little bit of NE humor. So that's another bit of evidence that maybe MBTI has got the functions right for ISTJ, because at the core type level, Socionics and MBTI and Berens, they have the types completely flipped in terms of their functions. The problem, in my opinion, is how Socionics is narrowly defining SI, and also the fact that SJ-ness is not necessarily due to functions. It might be an emergent property and something to do with temperament. But I would have to lay this out with lots of diagrams and lots of evidence for people to sort of get to my point and go through the EEG stuff. And because it is interesting that with sensory introverts, there is a hell of a lot of difference between subtypes. Like normalizing LSI and creative LSI are completely different. One's ISTJ, one's ISTP.
And I think that the S's, those flavors, are how influenced they are by their outside worlds, what they've learned over life, from their parents, from their friends, and what their work is. I think Dario's work has shown quite a bit how a person's job affects the functions that they use. It's if I understood him right in one video, the general patterns will be similar. Like a lot of INs, I think will have like the starburst pattern, and that'll still be there. But as far as what areas, if you look at areas of usage where those are the color block scans, that you can see more of the how heavily their profession affects the way that they use their brain and the different functions.
Oh yeah, from what I remember, Dario was saying starburst pattern for creative subtype. He's noticed that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he said even field for normalizing, left brain for dominance, and maybe like circuits going across for harmonizing, when he sort of saw those flavors.
Front brain for dominance, not left.
Ah, right, okay, yep, okay. Thanks for the correction. It's egos are not being broken here. It's the right evidence, right information for the audience.
Yeah.
My ego is not bound up with having a good memory anyway. Right.
But, okay, I just a quick comment regarding the backward benefit bias.
Yeah, I'll go back. Yeah.
ISTJ to benefit in INTP. I have somebody who is a ISTJ resembler, and they are really good at finances, and they help me with advice a lot. And because I'm completely clueless how to manage finances, and without them would be a little problematic. They're really good at it.
Yeah, I mean, Keirsey would say they are the absolute best as accountants. The inspector.
I'm curious. Oh yeah, they are. Do you think the INTP benefits the INFJ?
Yes, on intellectual level, it feeds their TI, their tertiary TI, and then they get bored of the INTP because they've had enough of that meal.
Yeah, that's why I think these don't work as pairs, like ISTJ and INTP as a pair on a project or a friendship even, is because it feels one-sided. I will say to me that with ENTPs, it feels one-sided to me. I often have a sense that ENTPs are drawn to me or want to have a conversation with me, but I get done with it, as you said. Like, okay, this is enough. I need something else to do. And that's why I don't think these work well as pairs. They need the circle going around, and you need that energy that comes with across the types. So like with mine and an ENFJ, it's just like a spiral of energy, and then the other way across the circle also.
What about if it was you, but with an ENTP, but it was like level 3 Enneagram ENTP, discipline, on course.
Discipline. Yeah. Oh no.
You might have more time for them. You might have more time for them.
No,
because they'll be more like you.
Nuts. No, if they were maybe a 7 enthusiast, or maybe, I don't know if there's a place for this model G, like a creative subtype. They're just like hyper creative and full of ideas. That NE bucket is very full and being accessed a lot. Then I think I could derive some more fun out of it, probably. And not be annoyed by the difference in thinking, because the different ways of building structure, the TI versus the TE, is I think where I get burnt out.
Thanks, Fate, for the super chat. So this actual thing about, so Keirsey's got his predisposed role variants. People can play all 16 role variants, but he's got this idea of logistical, strategic, tactical, and diplomatic intellects. And he did his PhD on intelligence and intelligence tests. He abandoned it, and then he did another one because he wasn't. And so he wanted to do intelligence based on intelligent actions, because then it's fair for everybody, because certain intelligence styles are harder to test than others. So it's easier to test logico-mathematical than it is to test, say, someone's people skills. and even visuospatial is only doing it in a certain way, and it's doing it and it's not doing it in a very quick instant time. Anyway, so it comes through in how somebody enacts a certain role. So somebody might say something like football IQ in American football, or boxing IQ. It's like the IQ that's related to the actual task of the role. And so Keirsey had this. So we can see that. So Keirsey had ENTJ as predisposed to the role of. He later called it mobilizer. The mobilizer of forces is like organizing everything towards a long-term strategic objective. And here, this is where some people will say something like this. Some socionics people will say, oh, in the MBTI, ENTJ is about hierarchy. In socionics, ESTP is about hierarchy. SLE is about hierarchy. Yes, but for what end? ENTJ is towards hierarchy because they think they know what they're doing and everybody else is incompetent, and it's putting them towards a long-term strategic objective, whereas SLE is more like putting people in a hierarchy for the sake of the hierarchy.
Yes.
And that relates probably to an SLE that's Enneagram 8 and like having a certain, and plus it's maybe a certain subtype of SLE, like dominant subtype SLE maybe, and that. But for ENTJ, it's establishing a hierarchy in order to get stuff done because they are the chief executive officer, and so they're the best type at that because you've got the TE and you've got the NI strategic vision and they're expressive and they've got more energy than INTJ. And so Keirsey's
so much energy.
Yeah. Whereas so Keirsey had I'll talk about these because what Keirsey did is he put the intelligence types sort of like on a physical level where you can see it. So he split up the NT strategic building intellect into two halves. Coordination, so coordinating resources towards long-term objectives. There's your T and your NI. NTJs, they coordinate, have the predisposition towards coordinating resources towards long-term objectives. Very good planning. He had systems theory and organization of systems for the NTPs. His son is uber INTP. Even Victor typed him as LII, probably harmonizing subtype. And I think in the report was accentuated NI for David Mark Keirsey. He's interested in comparative complexity. Like the most INTP names you could come up with for stuff that you're interested in. Comparative complexity, relational complexity and comparative science. So it's like total INTP stuff. You're not going towards a practical objective. You're just there comparing stuff to get an Uber theory. And another thing, and Keirsey typed Gregory Bateson, INTP, and Bandler and Grinder wrote this about Gregory Bateson, about one of his books, An Ecology of Mind. They said, simultaneously irrelevant and profound. I think that's INTP. Simultaneously irrelevant and profound. And so,
irrelevant and profound.
So
the INF, I think too.
Yeah. And so Keirsey's got in the organization designing models, designing systems. And it's like, what is simultaneous with what? And it's like, if you look at that, it's like, if you're going to do a functional analysis of this, you got to see structural logic. And Keirsey even writes about structures and reconfiguring structures, designing structures, and modeling them, applying them into prototypes. So you got that with ENTP, with that strong unvalued TE. The way he writes about it, it's like, this is definitely alpha NT when he is describing that half of the strategic intellect. And when you see organization, and he's writing about the mastermind rational, he's writing, every idea is subjected to the test of usefulness. And all of this stuff about, and he writes the mastermind, they don't show much emotional expression, but in close relationships, they can be a closet romantic. So all lines up with the functions. And then NI stuff, they are the most long-range strategic planners. They look for how things can go wrong. And it's like, that's like NI minus in Victor's system. So the NT is, in my opinion, line up very well. So getting back on track, so you've got this mobilizing resources towards a strategic objective. So you've got the CEO role of ENTJ, that they fit like a job. They're naturally predisposed to that role. You've got ESFJ. They are naturally a logistical collaborator, and Keirsey has them going towards supplying resources. So if we look over that, and what we have in Victor's profile is he writes about. I'll just write a bit about. I just want to see the bit where it says here. Here we go. And before I get back, so this is ESFJ, and this is about their SI. Loves to make gifts, serve others, and is a perfect event and leisure organizer. That is ESFJ doing a little bit of ENTJ. You are coordinating an event. You're a smaller level CEO, but it's for SFJ reasons, for social reasons.
Right. Coordinated, yeah, around people and social events and things like this that build relationships.
Yeah, and as I put there, so we can say figuratively that the ESFJ has an ENTJ inside of it, just a nicer one.
Just a jollier one. Yeah. Like
And
that
Vic
word in there,
does this.
jolly organizer.
Victor's doing this already, but he's doing it on the level of functions rather than the level of roles, because it's the same functions. You've got TE and NE, and that's social mission block of ENTJ. And so I'll go back to here. So to actually look at the roles, because the Keirsey roles exist, because it's like people supervise stuff, people inspect stuff, people compose stuff, people perform. The roles exist. But this one we can investigate as to how true it is. So people thought that Keirsey was into stereotypes. Well, did people know that Keirsey saw ESFJ as very good as a banker and financier, a patron and a sponsor? Did people know that? I was surprised by that. That goes beyond the stereotype.
So Keirsey?
Yeah, so this is Keirsey talking about, this is the role of provider. And so ESFJ is predisposed towards this. So I can ask you, Christen, have you seen ESFJs in business?
I know ESFJs more personally. I did work with someone that I'm quite certain operates that way. So in business, if I've seen this as like distributor, benefactor, a bit, yeah. But I also have seen in the workplace, they will defer to a coworker or a boss, though, that might take these things on.
Yeah.
If no one's doing it, they will step up into these roles. Yeah, as like a host or a benefactor, you know, or organizing money or funds that's going to go to someone who's in need, or organizing a party for everyone. Not even a party. It could just be an outing.
You can imagine somebody running say a corner shop or a business where there's a lot of logistics involved and a lot of like where you're dealing with customers a lot and you've got to have good relations with your customers. And you can say, and especially if they see it as I am providing a service to the local community, and it's like those skills, and the customers are going to love them. Where it's like, oh, this person's really nice with a smile on their face, and they've got a good character, and it's doing the simple things well, small margins. Whereas the ENTJ, it's like high risk, high reward, calculated risks, more calculated than ESTP. And ESTP can also be in business, but they act quicker, take advantage of opportunities quicker, don't consider the risks as much. Or if they do know it's risky, they don't care because they get a thrill out of the risk. Yeah,
let's see. So since you were mentioning I'm trying to pull up the graphic of the circles here. Yeah, because everyone that you just mentioned is in a circle together.
Yeah.
In the benefit circle together. So this is the ENTJ and an ESFJ who are across. That's like a pretty high energy relationship. And then the ESTP, being over on the side there. And I think the ESTP is, in this scenario, willing to take the risk and step up and take action on it. ENTJ, in my mind, map out more of risk rather than always acting on them, or they're very selectively act on it. But if they can map out a lot of risk reward scenarios and have an ESTP who's going to catch on to that and just put it into action, and then an ESFJ that's, as you said, more that front person, like corner shop or front desk, that friendly face towards everyone. So, and then who else is in the circle with them? Oh, the ENFPs, again, very bubbly with ideas, usually good with people to get along well.
I want to say something about that small group, the unnamed small group. Let's call them work styles. Keirsey's work style. So adaptive enterprise. So you've got NTJs there, proactive coordinators, so coordinating resources towards long-term objectives, TE and NI, and you've got expediters, STPs. They will get stuff done the quickest out there anyone. Not necessarily consider the consequences, but in an emergency, you get those.
Get it done.
And if they've got experience, they've got good instincts, and they're going to make the right decision. Boom, advance. And so that's why they're good on a tactical level. Tactical emergency. Someone once said, no battle plan survives contact with the enemy, and then adjust. And so again, the difference there is it's the same thing. It's proactive enterprise, and you're probing for options to advance towards a goal, but the difference is tactical versus strategic. And as you said, the NTJs are just going to be thinking about the consequences more, and STPs are quicker to act. Keirsey gave the example of comparing an ESTP CEO with an ENTJ CEO, and he said that the ESTP CEO would be quicker to cut the fat out of an organization before any resistance can mobilize against them. But they might act, but they are more likely to cut someone who is actually needed by the organization. And ENTJ will act slower and think it through more. So there you go, tactical versus strategic. Short-term versus long-term thinking. So politicians are frequently criticized for short-termism and political expediency. People can just look that up. Just Google that, political expediency, and it's all about short-termism. But again, in certain situations, that's the right intellect that fits the situation. Yeah. Now, other times, say somebody like Bernie Sanders, or he is unusual in that he's been somebody who's like very much stuck to his principles. I don't agree with those principles, but he's stuck with them. And it's just that the time has come. His sort of time has come. Whereas a lot like Trump, no principles at all, he'll get elected and say, I'm going to make America great again, and we're not going to make any cuts. Social security is safe. It's like he's promising everything. He's promising a free lunch to everybody. We can have greatness. We don't even have to raise taxes, and we can have more spending. So it's like, and that is the role of the con artist, the unhealthy promoter. Promoting schemes.
What do people want the most? Okay, I promise that.
Yeah, but here's the weird thing, though. And again, the connection. Advocating a cause, promoting a scheme. ESTP, ENFP. They're in the same ring. But we can look at that later on. So like I said, so I can see, and this helps me to see some male ESFJs. So if we think about gender role socialization and say, so you've got the ESFJ males, what kind of line of work they're going to be directed into? Oh, it might be this kind of line of work where they could be mistaken for an STJ because part of their FE might be, oh, I'm going to act like a man, and a man acts like this. A man isn't like super emotionally expressive. Yeah. So, for example,
I think a lot of that, the macho maleism comes out in that type and that sex. So just on average.
So the actor who played the camp guy in, was it called American Family or something? Is it called American Family? The one with, and it had
The cartoon.
no, it had no, not that. It was an American sitcom. It had the guy in that was in Married with Children.
Oh.
Modern Family. Modern. Is it called Modern Family?
Oh, okay.
Something like that.
I haven't seen it. I'm pretty out of touch with TV.
No. What I'm sort of getting into in terms of emotional expression is the guy that played the guy who was very camp. The actor is straight, and they asked him where he got his performance from, and he said that he based his performance on his mother. And so he's like very large and very expressive. So his mother may be ESFJ. So what I'm sort of saying is that there might be a difference in, if we look at, say, the emotional expressivity of ESFJ male versus ESFJ female, I would think that it's toned down in ESFJ male because of gender role socialization. And that you only then notice the difference with that, say, that camp character in Modern Family. And he said he based his performance on his mother.
That depends. I've seen a quite expressive ESFJ guy who just abundance of positivity. Just he walks into the room and the whole room just lights up. He has this kind of face, like just he's so freely sharing that.
And look at the way of the audience.
Can I ask what culture he grew up in?
Oh yes, was it Latino?
Chinese culture.
Oh wow, that's surprising because usually that's seen as SI and reserved. I was just going to say, Andrew, your voice when you talked about that, you could tell. Okay, talking positively about my dual hair. So we've got that. So we can see here, at least in terms of the roles, we can see complementarity between the roles. And this is what I noticed in the Model Gs when I looked at social mission block and social adaptation block, is I saw the types in those blocks, and I saw the Keirsey roles. And so for ESFG, I thought, hang on a minute, supplier of resources, coordinator of resources. These go together. And it makes sense that the whole thing in Model G is, if these two functions in the social mission block don't get the task done, we then switch to these other functions. And it makes sense that the role would be complementary in the social adaptation block. So now I can move forward onto the next graphics. I will get onto that in a moment, but this is then seeing that I'm not just making it up to sort of show that there is sort of stuff in here about, so for ESFJ here, knows how to cheer up others and is very hospitable. A form of provider supplying. Also see note in green box on coordinating as a perfect event and leisure organizer. So people might be thinking, oh, Ben, you're just cherry picking 1 point out of 14 to see a connection. But if we see here, logistical coordinators, logistical conservators, I think this sounds like Alpha SF. The friendly guardians are prone to choose the part of conservator, that the person whose job it is to support the by ensuring supply and security. All this about, and then, the one here is more this. This is more Alpha SF, shielding others from harm, dangers like SI minus, physical safety, security, all that sort of stuff. And then we get to this one, and again here, strategic coordinators. This is quite funny, right? Those rational, so NTs, who are quick to judge and make schedules, are eager to take the part of coordinator. Coordinators determine who is to do what at a given time and place, and this role requires a directive character. Coordinators steadily increase in directiveness as they mature, such that they easily and comfortably command others and expect to be obeyed. Indeed, coordinators, so NTJs are predisposed towards this role, coordinators are surprised by any resistance to their directives because it is so clear to them that others do not know what to do. Presumably, because their goal is unclear or absent, so NI, and because they apparently have no strategy in mind by which to proceed. So in the view of practical thinking towards long-term objectives, so in the view of the coordinator, you shouldn't say coordinator, you should say the enterprising ENTs. He changed his terminology later on because coordinator is the role, not the type. Is the view of the coordinator. Most people are operating blindly and going around in circles, plainly need direction.
I love this. Oh
So-
my gosh.
So
I think I mentioned to you, I had a student who was 8 years old at the time and an ENTJ. And the name of field marshal for this one I love because it's just like, you know, a little 8-year-old field marshal running around with these complex NI plans in his head and just wanting to execute it in the world. And it was exactly all of this strong, even at a young age coming out, which is pretty magnificent. Thinking that like no one else around has a plan, you know, I, you know, clearly need to step in and make a plan here and get other people involved and make this happen.
yeah, I mean, it's like, so for instance, the type would be, actually, no, that's the name of the role, coordinator mobilizer. And then you've got
And
coordinator.
you're saying INTJ
arranger.
also for this one?
Yeah,
For that top paragraph?
But they can do this. They're second best at this. Their first one is arranging contingencies, where they're the person who sat down, planning stuff out. If this goes wrong, we do this. If this, then that.
Yes.
And again, look at the negative, NI minus, looking for how things can go wrong. And ENTJ positive in there. And that's a little bit quicker. Not as quick as the STP is, but pretty darn quick. And Linda Bowen's talked about. Go on, Andrew.
There's just a bit of a thing I cannot reconcile.
That's fine.
So there are these benefit rings which kind of like feed into each other, kind of supporting each other's desires to be good at something.
Yep.
And you also mentioned how ESFJ, when unable to do their primary function, they shift into, I mean, that's what Victor says, shift into the social adaptation block, which happens to be a shift into superego, like when they shift in activity. However, sideways shifts, right? ESFJ doesn't shift into ENFP, or at least it's not suggested. Like the social ring, but they are shifting more into INFP rather when they need to do humanitarian activity. ESFJs, and the same goes with not shifting into ESTP when they're doing like in the leadership positions, but more into ISTP. That's what's recommended according to Model G. How do you reconcile that?
Well, when I compared roles of ESFJ. What I looked at was something like, so I learned about beneficiary shift, and he's got it here. The ESF. So Keirsey had ESFJ as somebody who is good at social events and things for the community. Now, and then you've got the role of advocating for a cause. So there's overlap there between, say, an ESFJ who's organising an event, some community work, and then you've got to advocate for that cause to help the community. So there's role overlapping there, advocating the cause, because they are beneficent. Keirsey's got guardians as beneficent, actively kind on a practical level, and sometimes you might have to, like if you're organising and running a charity and doing that kind of volunteer work, you might have to advocate for that. And also, ESFJs have got a silly side where they've become humorous and they act a little bit like ENFP. I've seen that with Elena Ames on her YouTube.
Yeah, I can identify with that too. ESTJ, I think that's the shared NE.
Yeah.
And I view that as the third function, the child role, which is playful. So it's like a playful function in a playful position for ESFJ and ESTJ. And I think that's where like some unexpected, just like letting everything fly to the wind and having fun and doing cartwheels around and not caring what falls out of your pockets can come into play that seems out of character for those types.
Right. So I'm going to do this in order. The TI rider is in control of the NE horse, because I'll get to the comparison in a moment. Because what I'm comparing at the moment is the blocks in the societal row to the roles. And so we've talked about we get that. ENTJs, we've gone through this, CEOs, that kind of thing. And so we've got these two next to, so we've got providing resources, top left, coordinating resources, top right. And then, is that the same for that one? Right, and that's the same for that one. So now we can do is we can compare the two. So we have, so the top row is the top row of ESFJ, and the bottom row is the top row of ESTJ. So this is the social mission of ESTJ. This is the social mission of ESFJ. That's social adaptation of ESFJ, social adaptation of ESFJ. No, social adaptation of ENTJ. And so I've made these comparisons with these numbers. So in terms of, I put B next to 2, easily interacts with people. And so then we look at FE here for, and so to find the connection with ENTJ. Wait a minute, B with B, that's it. It plays the role of nice guy, gal, makes a lot of friends, and participates in a lot of events. But in many cases, they don't give it the desired feeling of harmony or enthusiasm. So that matches the B here. Now, on a functional level, you can say FE plus, FE plus. And I've got it here. And frequently, ENTJs are 3s or have a 3 in their tri-type. And I've got ENTJ playing an ESFJ role for E3 social networker reasons, especially business. I think that's what we see. Business events, and they're doing it for, so just like we said before with Julia doing a science thing for an SFJ reason, you've got someone being social here for an ENTJ coordinating E3 reason. What we got here? And then I've matched up never without its business card. That's just my addition. I think that's true. If they still do business cards these days. Do they still do business cards, Christen?
Yeah.
Right, networker. So I think
it changes at times, but overall, most people still do.
And so I've got this for ENTJ. Many ENTJ resemblers also resemble a tri-type with a 3 in it, so they might already be practiced in the area of facade maintenance, or more truthfully, accentuating the positive, especially their accomplishments, to polish their image of success, to inspire confidence in them from contacts who could be potential investors. MB, the want of all sorts. Oh, wait a minute, I should have put they want all sorts of business contacts, not just investors. I've got to change that in the graphic. They want all sorts of business contacts, not just investors. The networker could be added to this list. So ENTJ is a networker. You could say this is ENTJ when they're shifting to acting towards ESFJ that helps them in their social mission of business stuff. Because there is a people aspect to business. If we then look at number A, ENTJ is a true egalitarian and likes all kinds of people involved in having a good time. Sometimes, though, I think that involved in having a good time is going to then go to A. Oh, egalitarian.
Oh,
egalitarian.
That was interesting.
And then ENTJ is a true egalitarian.
Oh, your audio cut. Andre, can you remind me your question? You were asking about specific types and the benefit rings and the shifts. What were the types that you asked about?
ESFJ, right? According to Victor Alenko, like there's a shift, opposite shift will be actually ENTJ. So that is social adaptation. It kind of makes sense. But then the side shift, like ESFJs are communicators and socialites. I don't know the proper word. But if the side shift would be either shifting towards leadership or technical roles, or humanitarian / culture. something to do with that role. So it's not necessarily communicating. So according to Victor, it doesn't happen along the beneficiary ring. Like, for example, shift to humanitarian role would not be ENFP. It would be towards INFP. And this way they can preserve the energy, and they can also preserve the positive sign, like it's FI positive rather than NE negative. So, and the same with the leadership role, it's not beneficiary shift to ESTP, but rather towards ISTP. So if they want to be like leaders, they have to be more organized and building structures and hierarchies, that sort of thing.
Right. I guess I can clarify one way I view these two. Isn't that it would benefit a person to make a personal shift in a way or with their functions in these? That it's more to be able to reach out to a friend that has that and can give them that. Does that make sense? I look at different benefits for personally, like if me as an ESTJ, I want to grow, that I would look more at the function stacks and the way that I want to use them, and then ask myself, okay, what type do I think uses this function well, and how do they use it?
So you're saying when the person enacts on a more humanitarian role, it's probably a good idea to, in order to sustain this role, to follow maybe like Victor's suggestion. But if you're helping somebody else, you're benefiting somebody else, it's maybe worth following the beneficial ring, that sort of deal.
Yeah. I think it would be different. A person like if it's an ESFJ in a humanitarian role, that it sounds like Victor's switch he's saying would be correlate with an INFP. Yeah. And that makes sense to me. Yeah. So I think it's different than a person needing to fulfill a different role, what path they might take, versus if they have a say in who they work with or who they ask help from, that would be where the ring of benefit, or even across the ring, could work out.
Okay. Well, thanks for clarifying.
Oh, Ben, you still don't have audio. Yeah, I've used these for students to help them pair up or know where to ask for help or where to look for help. So like an ESFJ, and it's really interesting that Ben's going into the way that the ESFJ and ENTJ can resemble each other or have pieces of their roles that seem similar between those two types.
Can you hear me now?
There you are. Yep.
Right. So Keirsey would see NFs as benevolent. So it's more, I'm going to be kind to humanity, good feelings. And so it's more on a psychological level. It's not as you can see, beneficence, actively kind for SJs. Go on, Andrew. You have the floor.
Yeah, ENFJs, I'm not necessarily benevolent.
Well, I think that depends on health.
Yeah.
There are some I think there's some good ENFJs out there.
Oh, I love ENFJs. I get along with them so well.
Personal experiences.
Very high energy, but yeah, not always.
Sorry, my mother is a ENFJ resembler. It's a constant clash.
Yeah, I have noticed that.
Oh yeah.
There are nice ENFJs out there, and then there are also cult leaders and egotists. It's just mental health. It's just like with any function. It's like, especially with FI DOMs, you can have an FI DOM who's completely selfish and can't do empathy, and then you can also have FI DOMs who are fantastic at reading people because they've got that really good empathy and not got any baggage of their own. Yes,
that is like a completely polar opposite that exists with people with the FI DOM or FI auxiliary. Is that can be drastically selfish or drastically very high empathy skills, being able to put themselves in someone else's shoes and consider the way that they feel. And this just comes into the health level of the person and what they've grown up with and what skills they've acquired.
So we've got here, just looking at the similarities, communicates with others as equals. That's for ESFJ. And then when we go to ENTJ, is a true egalitarian and likes all kinds of people. So treats people as equals, is a true egalitarian. It's the same thing. And again, you can see it in terms of functions, FE plus, FE plus. And then other similarities. I think I've done all of these ones. Potential. Oh, here we go. Will enthusiastically pick up any initiative with the potential, launched by any. Creative subtype, more so. Normalizing, less so. But again, it depends what area it's in. If it's in the area like on, I personally would think if it's on a logistical level and someone gives them an idea, yeah, let's do it, let's help people. What goes towards their values. Wait a minute. Oh, hey, Baldy, go to the note to myself. Oh, and this was extra. Have I got that one in? Have I got that? Yeah, I got that slide there. But I've just got to look at, I made a mistake. No, there it is. So ones to look at, and then I'll go into that slide about something about the superego types. C, with experience becomes more and more agile and entrepreneurial. Yeah, I knew it. Yeah, I knew this. Rena was starting a hair extension business. She would earn a load of money from it, but she became ill. Like, if you're doing hair extensions, they cost like $1,000. And it's like, so for about 2 hours work, you can earn about $800. So good business there, folks, if you want to get into the hair extensions business. Can you confirm that, Christen, that hair extensions are expensive?
It is popular with women. Oh, I don't know. I've never looked at it, but I know it's popular with women. I have no idea. I'm not surprised to hear that it's lucrative.
Right. So when I was talking to her about it, she was saying, like, if you want the blonde hair, you have the Russian long hair or the Indian hair for brunette hair, and using fusion techniques to actually fit the hair properly with like a proper glue with ultraviolet light and get it properly in there, and it'd be like $1,000 for it. With experience becomes more agile and more entrepreneurial. You're going to say something? And then go on.
Go ahead.
You want me to go back?
There's just a quick comment. Isn't that like getting wigs cheaper? Like that would be just, you don't need to like modify your hair. Sorry.
Well, yeah, I mean, yes, but I'm not gonna.
Sounds valid to me.
Well, I mean, I don't need a wig, but I don't. Well, perhaps I do need a wig. Right. Right.
They actually, okay, so now I have to jump in. The only reason I know anything about this is because I saw a social media ad where this girl like pulls out her hair, and it's like a halo. It's like a ring that goes around your head, so you like cut it into the hairline here, and it's extensions. And there was something in the ad about, you know, basically paying like a one-time fee of like a few $100s for this. It's like a portion of a wig kind of that you can embed in your hair versus paying, and they said something times more for the extensions that I guess people like to have placed on regularly.
Yeah, like proper fusion where they actually join the fibers together at the roots. Because I remember like writing stuff for a website about this, where they'll last about 6 months, and she gave loads of information about how to care for the hair extensions as well. So there's an example though, and I did the Keirsey type sorter with her. I initially thought she was ENFP because like she's creative as well. So she probably, when she went through that, I thought, of course, she's ESFJ, and so now creative subtype ESFJ, and she was a lyricist as well. So there you go. There is an example of an ESFJ resemblance being entrepreneurial. And then number C, here we go. An enterprising person who moves quickly from words to action. And so that matches with experience becomes more and more agile and entrepreneurial. So Victor's repeats stuff at different scales. And so also something, its actions are always well calculated. So this is about ENTJ. See purple note about strategic intellect. Right. And then this is something I mentioned before. In Keirsey, this is the strategic intellect, which is the highest in NTs. He calls them strategic builders. And then serial order and organization of systems. Something like we went through that before, like about half an hour ago. sort of flog that horse to death. And then what we got here? Contacts. We mentioned there with the contacts. Network of contacts, and then we mentioned here for contacts as well. D, networker. But I inserted that, but I think that's true for ENTJ. They are networker. Enthusiastic in action, effective in sales, is quick at building a network of contacts. Again, for TE reasons. I added this. Role position improves over time. Yes, he frequently adds something like this. As time goes by, learns to. That text frequently appears in this box because the role function is, because Victor has it as, it's like a muscle in an athlete, has to be continually trained. As time passes by, learns to be more pragmatic and prudent. 6.
Yeah, because I think that facilitates their first role, their first function to be maximized. They start to realize that they need these other bucket of skills. As ESTJ with TE and my, primary function, it's like, oh, I need some FE stuff to have all my TE SI stuff continue developing the way that I'm idealizing. Especially
if you've got ESFJ in the role of supplying stuff, then they're going to improve their TE in order to do that. While building a career, polishes an image of an entrepreneurial person who can quickly solve problems. ENTJ-ish image. Number C, an enterprising person who moves quickly from words to action. Then I did this bit about, beneficiary shift. I did that bit there. Now, this is a technical bit in this next one. This is about the similarities between ESFJ and ENTJ on a... So I'll write about this with the functions. I'll let you read this and comment. You don't have to read it out loud. Although perhaps I'll do read it, because I looked at my Google Analytics. If you read it out loud for people on little phones. So
these two functions, TE plus and NE negative, are in the social mission block of TE and X, also known as the entrepreneur and humanitarian socionic, named entrepreneur, but who would argue against TE and X in acting the role of CEO as a resource coordinator. FESX is in the same supervision ring, information metabolism, and social benefit ring as an energy metabolism as TE and X. Shown in function-related task execution, such as performing a heavy TE-related task, shows the information and energy to exact it was there. Compare TI and X, the LII, who, due to lack of energy for TE application, few would know has high information metabolism for TE. It is easier to see the energy metric of a function applied than to see TE info metabolism in the TI and X head. See the fine print in the inflation avoidance block.
Yeah, and then so that's why Victor, because this is one of the things that Andrew helped me a lot with, like describing the energy metrics.
Yeah, and that's so true that I see in the TI and the X, also the INTP, is that that metabolism of information isn't visible and it's not communicated often either, because you can have the FE inferior, which can sometimes I think lead into that fear of sharing and acceptance, and if it's going to be appreciated, because if it's not that, or if it's actively spoken against, then all that metabolism into the TI isn't recognized or appreciated.
I mean I've been listening to Peter Schiff for 10 years and I'm starting to think maybe I should apply this knowledge.
After 10 years.
Right.
Okay. Just a comment. Again, I'm obsessed with shifts of activity, and so for TI and X, that would shift into ESTJ role if they were leaders or some sort of like a technical job. So the ESTJ's lead is with a TE negative sign. Right, so that would have to kind of decentralize and organize the process, and whereas in an intellectual level, TE positive is how to invest resources is much better for TI and X than TE negative, and yet it is recommended to use TE negative when INTP is leading a group, for example. So there's a bit of an inconsistency here, which I don't know what's the intellectual development of the use of TE negative, how to maintain stuff, how to kind of like, I don't know. It's a bit of an inconsistency
Yeah,
here.
I think an INTP trying to integrate TE positive or negative into distributing information would be stressful. I don't know because I'm not that type, but
I have a theory.
I
have a theory. Because INTP, can you hear me at the moment? Can you hear me? My theory would be that TE plus requires more energy. You've got to take more risks, and it's harder for INTP to take those risks with the weak extroverted sensing, the extroverted sensing break. I see TE minus as more conservative, and so maybe TE minus is easier for INTP to do because they've not really got the energy to take the risk, that kind of risk. With the ENTJ, if we think about how they run a business, I see ENTJ as slogging their guts out more than ESTJ. Although you might have some pushback there, Christen.
Say that again.
You might have some pushback. You might have some pushback there. You might have a face-off. No, I work just as hard as the ENTJ.
More productive. No, they are more productive. They can go forward off the idea or the end goal or the end game longer than I can. I need to see some tangible results. Like I get fed by that like real world input, and they can keep going without it. They can have more fortitude.
Maybe it's another thing, Andre, of INTP gets launched by SI, and ENTJ is really weak at SI. So maybe there's a little bit more synergy there with ESTJ.
Yeah, so I would speculate.
Go ahead, Christen.
Oh, that INTP sharing information or structure build or a discovery of a way to do something would be best to do using the SI function.
Yeah.
Detailed explanation. I think, Ben, I've seen this in your materials that you put together. That it's like a lot of details carefully organized. Like slowly when I go back and look at an image, it's like, oh, there's like so many minute little detailed gems like all over the place structured together, but you have to really get into it. And that would be a less stressful or more productive way for an INTP to share.
But you see, Keirsey says that INTP is likely to be better at performing ENTJ role than the role of the administrator.
That's a good point.
So it's
maybe intellectually, but no, you know what I mean? Because it's like the high information thing. Like I can imagine INTP being able to give somebody advice like, on an ENTJ level, but not do it for themselves. They could lay out the plan. You could lay out a plan, Andre. You could lay out the plan. I've got to get that emphasis right. You could lay out the plan for others to follow.
Okay, and then the same thing when the INTP shifts to communitarian, it is towards the mentor role, which is FE negative.
Yeah.
Whereas INTP is really seduced by positive emotions.
Yeah.
And that's kind of also almost asking. I get the feeling that the adaptation block, like FI negative of INTP, gets into because I feel like I'm more resemble normalizing INTP. I become more condemning when I, disapprove of bad behavior in students. But now then I kind of like bring it up to more an atmosphere like, okay, this is the discipline. You have to follow this kind of like thing. But it's also a little bit odd.
Yeah, I get that as well. Yeah, I got like 1 in my tri-type. Like I've switched around the 4 and the 1. I'm now 7-1-4. And so I've got quite a few INFP traits. But I got a lot of those ESI traits in there. So, but again, it depends. But also, I would argue traits of the composer when I was writing my. Where is it? It's over here. My stage play. There you go, Warmer and Rena. So that's the same Rena that I mentioned in the T.
Oh,
box.
yeah. Right. The hair extension.
Yeah.
ESFJ, right?
Yeah, ESFJ.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what am I saying? I've lost track. Darn it. Why was I bringing up my story?
I derailed it. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, because
Yeah,
two
I
different
should say
kinds
two.
two different kinds of ISFP. The ISFP composer, but then the ISFP like
Uh-huh.
moralist. And I can see myself doing both.
Novelist?
Moralist.
ISFP?
Moralist.
Model, like
Moralist.
models.
No,
No,
moral.
moralist.
What?
Oh,
Bad
right,
behavior, good
Oh,
behavior.
morals. Oh, I was trying to get
Yes,
the
it's
root
not a
word out.
word that's used a lot, moralist.
Morals. Moralist.
Yeah.
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 Especially
ISFP.
these days.
Oh, yeah, definitely. But just, I think too, they are the most likely moralist out of the artisan group.
Yes. And we could also
Pretty
send functions.
rigid morals,
FI.
actually, and
Yes.
expectations and
I've got a story about that.
hierarchical. Right. They are surprisingly rigid with these.
Well, yeah, and that's with the NE break. Because one of the things with the NE is like, oh, this point of view, that point of view, that point of view. And it's like with INFP is healthy. They can integrate different points of view. Because it's like, oh, I see your point of view, and they reconcile them, which fits with the Keirsey role of reconciler for INFP. What else was I going to say? I've forgotten. So if you read this bit at the bottom, Christen, about where it says
Oh, yeah.
when FE plus.
All right. And I'll have to go in about 5 or maybe 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Let's see. So when FE plus and SE negative cannot get the job done, FESX, ESE can switch to TE plus and any negative. Usually the role enacted by the superego type is complementary. The FESX can play provider supplier, and the TENX can play coordinator mobilizer. So you can see how both types are good at moving resources. This complementarity is why the text in the social adaptation block frequently reads like a smaller scale version of the text in the social mission block of the superego type, also known as the role TE plus here above reads like a smaller scale version of lead TE plus in TENX. TENX profile as an enterprising person who quickly moves from words to actions, tends to pursue its goals with great determination and energy.
Right, I'm just going to be, I am not going to be accused of sweeping stuff under the rug. We have Thelonious here and the ENTJ resembler who's giving a little bit of a pushback, and we will address this.
Yeah.
So Thelonious, if you want to give a
slog their
super chat,
guts
I am owning up.
Yeah.
So here we go. ENTJs don't slog their guts out. They build a system that is adaptable and do the work for them. They don't like judgery at all. They want to be as efficient and effective as possible. That is true.
Oh yeah, absolutely. They do. I think what it is that they put in energy that is towards a system that has been built out or is being built out that is adaptable. And I think they're willing to put the work in to make that happen, whereas some others aren't. And
Right.
I think that's where it might be viewed by others as, wow, they're really drudging on. But to the ENTJ, it's a pretty well laid out plan.
Yeah.
ENTJ, the impact they strive for is derived from strategic leveraging of knowledge and resources, with minimum necessary input for maximum sustainable output. Yes.
Yeah. And so, for instance, that's one of these things
that they're very good at this.
So Dario, probably creative subtype ILI, he uses leverage all the while, but his book was aimed at TJs. Like his 8 keys to self-leadership. It was all about leveraging functions to get stuff done. And he even called TI gaining leverage through a framework. And then I said, Dario, that's not how NTPs use it. And he said, yes, but STPs use it like that, Ben. Right. So, and then we can sort of, what we could do
there
is
was
just
one other question in the chat.
Sorry.
That we didn't
from
earlier. It was an INTJ benefiting from an INTP, and curious about that. Right. So an INTJ who's, I don't know if this person's still on either. My question would be benefiting in what way? Because there's so many different ways to benefit. So is it from information or with social stuff or with personal growth?
I think what he's saying is that he resembles INTJ, and he watches this channel.
Yeah, I think
Right.
that's this way.
That's it.
So,
Yeah. They take what's useful. We just spurt out loads of ideas.
I just view that as probably an information benefit.
so just a quick comment regarding the Thelonious monks that ENTJs don't slog their guts out. So if I am as an INTP will shift into leadership position, maybe I'm more comfortable with the TE negative approach, where I take this thing slow and I kind of push the whole organization forward, steady as she goes, a little bit careful, and that sort of thing.
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Yeah. So what we could do, Christen, is come back and look at another super ego pair next week, and we can pretty much say that are you happy to do that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to go through other super ego pairs.
Yeah, because then we can say because mainly
pair
today
in particular, and then trickling a little bit into how that plays into the ring a little bit.
Yeah, so I'll just and then so we can do like one super ego pair a week because it's in the details, because it's so abstract that it only comes through in the examples. So this is an example of using socionics things about what are the important connections between a superego pair. So I've got here to enact the ENTP typical role with ENTP thinking. One would require. Oh yes, this is Jack. This is Jack saying. This is about Jack would say ESFJ would more likely to act like ENTP because it's in the same quadra. And Victor says that classical socionics is obsessed by quadras and duality. So Jack Aaron said that ESFJ is more likely to act like ENTP, and Victor would say, well, based on this, in this context of like work in societal role, ESFJ is more likely to act like ENTJ for these reasons. To enact an ENTP typical role with ENTP thinking, that's a caveat I've added, would require two impossibilities. So what it's saying here that ESFJ would have to go from EJ linear assertive rationality to EP flexible active irrationality. And also it has to change its form of cognition from vortex synergetic, which is the form of cognition of ESFJ, to causal determinist. Whereas ESFJ and ENTJ have the same EJ mindset. They're both linear assertives, they're both EJ, and they have the same form of cognition, vortex synergetic. So they haven't got any valued functions in common, but they do have those important connections. So this is about enacting an ENTJ typical role. So in ESFJ enacting an ENTJ typical role, coordinating resource. I'm going out a little bit on a limb here. By enacting the ENTJ typical role, coordinating resources would allow ESFJ to stay in its social adaptation block, same as the social mission block of ENTJ, which uses role-playing TE plus, launch at NE minus, NB. The TE plus NE minus social adaptation block of ESFJ has the same form of cognition, information metabolism as the Glencoe mindset temperament has its FB plus SE minus social adaptation block. Weak functions of ESFJ would not be required to enact the coordinated social role because it's at that societal distance. Enacting the ENTJ role would enable to play a complementary role to the social mission of ESFJ, supplying, consistent with social benefit ring role complementarity. And Victor has his own thoughts on about how these roles are complementary in sort of like social development. Andrew sent me a paper on that. And so this is something I think we can discuss with Dario and Victor, because Dario is interested in these benefit ring things. Not as much as the PIPS planes, but we might get there. Cutting edge typology.
My interest with these runs deep on applicability, using it,
Okay. Can I mention one bit here?
Yep.
On his website, Victor at least on the psychological level, he distinguishes all these 4 rings of benefit. They for different, I guess, reasons, if you will.
Yep.
So the one, the one we were looking at today, ESFJ, NFP, ENTJ, and ESTP, it's a ring of transformation, which is used for fast, but at the same time, slow changes. And, you know, could we comment on that or kind of integrate into the discussion? Like there's some rings are meant for involution, some rings are meant for evolution, transformation, and revolution.
We might have to do that next time because Christen's got to go.
Yeah, I'll have to hop off in a minute. Yeah. Yeah, I think we can maybe incorporate that into these as we go through the rings, the superego types and the rings is why. And I think it is dependent on if they're extrovert or introverted in the rings. Yeah. So this is an extroverted ring. So I think that has to do with transformation, which is a little bit more of a rippling out thing. Whereas some of the introverted rings are going to be changes rippling in. But I view all of them as having both high and low energy in them in ways that things are done rapidly and ways that other things are slow changes that come out.
I like this comment from you, Thelonious. Thank you. We are we're tackling one of the hardest concepts in Socionics, the benefit ring, and I hope to do an event with Victor and Dario on this benefit relationship because it is so tricky, especially the way Victor describes it, where you've got like an unconscious request for something, and you've got the request transmitter and request receiver.
It is unconscious, these rings and the benefits that's received. Like I'm supposed to benefit from an ESFP, which is my mom, and I'm like, really? I guess that, which is an interesting role play in our relationship, and then to see it out on paper. But I was very puzzled by that for a long time. It's an intuitive, under the radar thing that happens.
So I'm just going to put this on screen for a little bit. We'll talk about it in future. It's just so people can pause it and go through it. So this is like an example of Victor again talking about, but again, this was not from a brilliant translation. Again, it's an unconscious request that's on a social level. So it's quite complicated, and we can go over that with Andrew next time, and hopefully. Mitchell will be here. Mitchell couldn't be here because he attended a lesson with Victor. He is a paying member of the Eureka Club. So we got the best guests.
Nice.
We have the best guests, I reckon, on this show. But I had to tone that down a bit to pretty good guests because I don't think that tone was working well with the audience. I lost some subscribers. Right, so I might as well end the event now. So that we can...
I'm gonna hop off.
Yeah. Right, so. Bye-bye, folks, and I'll talk to Christen for a minute before she actually does leave.